Chapter 1.1 Line, Shape, and the Principle of Contrast, video part 4. We're going to get into contrast. We're finishing up with implied shape here. Now, implied shape is a lot like implied line earlier in the chapter. Usually it's sort of a broken form, a broken edge, and then we are implying that we're drawing a shape. Same thing here with this triangle. You can kind of make out that this is a triangle even though it's not fully rendered or drawn, if that makes sense. But we want to, um, our eye will sort of finish the rest of this shape and fill it in and then create a foreground, background, or a figure background reference. This particular artwork, Saul Bass's AT&T logo from 1984, which is still around. It's been changed, I think, a little bit. But what we're looking at in terms of implied shape is this highlight. If you stand away from it, and quite honestly, the image in the book I think is a little better than the one here. There's more white in the book image. You see this as a highlight, as a sort of implied shape, and it makes it a bit more three-dimensional. So it seems like there's a circular shape there, and it implied swelling on the globe. All right, contrast. So contrast is something that is really going to come into the writing that you're going to do for this course. It is a principle, the principle of contrast. So we're out of the elements. Line and shape are elements. Contrast is a principle. And when you talk about a principle, you have to explain in the artwork what's actually happening. So what that means is, for contrast, you're using noticeably different states of an element, like, for example, geometric and organic shapes that we looked at, and I'm going to backtrack for a second because we did look at this. We had all those geometric shapes here in the background, and then we have all these organic shapes with the flowers and the clothing. Okay, so that's a contrast of shapes. A lot of times what you have is a contrast in value. That is the most common way contrast exists. And we also are talking about lines and things like that. Now, in this particular piece, this is Carrie Mae Weems' Untitled, and we have two different types of contrast happening. Part of the idea here, or part of the working mechanism here, is the fact that it's a black and white photograph. A black and white photograph is going to show contrast more clearly than perhaps a painting, because then you're dealing with the hue of the color mixed in with the value. In this case, we just have values. There's no colors in this painting. And I know it's sort of like in our brain, we sort of decide that this wood table maybe looks like wood or this looks like silver, but in fact, what we're really seeing is black and white. So there's sharp contrast, and we see that with the light source. That's the most common way that light and dark contrasts are made. Bright light here and dark, square here and the lampshade. Dark clothing, light mirror here. There's highlights. You can kind of see on her eyelid and the top of her cheek. There's some highlights there. Of course, there's highlights there. The little girl's a little less dramatic, but we do see shadows and we see light in this piece. So that's one type of contrast, that of value, and that's the most common. The other contrast here that we're seeing is we have a triangle, a square, a rectangular door. We have the table mixed with the organic shapes of the people. The people are always organic. And then we have some lipstick tubes. Those are fairly geometric, the cylinders. And this chair gets a little more organic, even though you could break down parts of this as geometric. There's a contrast of light and dark, which is value, and there's a contrast of geometric and organic shapes. We're going to get into positive and negative shapes, and Sometimes this gets confused with space, and it's a little, it's kind of hard to uh, define here very well, but a positive shape is defined by its surrounding empty space, the negative space. In visual form, positive and negative are often represented by black and white, but any color combination can work. So the negative space around something, um, that works as well, and we'll try to get into this a little bit. Okay, so with Shepard Fairey's Obey, we have this high contrast of white and black because he's trying to catch our eye. Same thing down here. Of course, red always catches our eye because that refers to blood and fire. But we have a high contrast here, but also we have a simplified graphic image of a face that has uh, negative and positive shapes. Okay, so here he is pasting up on his artwork back in the day, 1996, when he is not doing this with any legal permission, and that's part of the controversy of street art. And he uses those interlocking positive and negative shapes because he's trying to go for that strong visual graphic impact. He's, trying to catch people coming by. He's an LA-based artist, and I believe I would say even more to the point where driving by, you got to catch somebody's attention even more. A lot of graphic imagery, meaning graphic design, even the AT&T logo, anything that's a logo, the Nike logo that we looked at, a lot of that stuff is geared toward people driving by and looking at a billboard very quickly. So they're trying to get your attention as best he can. So it was based on Andre the Giant, who actually passed away, I think 10 years after that, maybe not that long. Okay, George O'Keeffe's Music, Pink and Blue, number 2. We do see this idea of positive and negative here, but now we're looking at more of the color being the operational element, right? So it is a shape, but the color, the dark blue, is bringing us backward. That's value as well, the darkness. The value of this blue brings us back. So this shape is to us um, a negative shape, if that makes sense. And then the positive shape is our pink curvature up here, right? So this is coming forward and this is receding. This is a really interesting piece here, and this is a graphic image. This is Noma Bar's Gun Crime. Now, on our first look at this, we're seeing the outline of the gun. Perhaps, sometimes people see this first. But the gun, and this is our background, and this is our foreground. Also, we call this figure, the figure is here, and the ground, it's also short for background. Figure, ground. Now, when we look at this piece here and we start to see the face, this becomes the figure and that becomes the ground. So there's a figure ground reversal, and we're going to look at another case of that as well. But this is a very strong use of positive and negative shapes, and it also includes figure ground reversal. Escher, he is really the premier figure ground reversal, and I would say he really plays around with space too, visual space, but we'll look at that perhaps later. So with this piece, you see the most defined finished bird up here, and this dark bird against a light sky. The bird is the figure, the white sky was what we're calling it. That is the ground. And then as we move through, we shift right in here. We shift toward the fish being the white area and being the positive, and the figure and the black being the negative shape and the ground. And then it finishes down here with a very strong detailed fish. So this is figure ground reversal which happens as we move down this piece.